Today's episode is sponsored in part by Palo Alto Networks and its Prisma SASE, where AI-powered innovation takes center stage. Watch the new Palo Alto Networks virtual event on demand to hear how the latest innovations in SASE can help your organization. See how ZTNA 2.0, Cloud Secure Web Gateway, and SD-WAN deliver exceptional security and ROI. Watch on demand at paloaltonetworks.com/engage/SASE-signature-moment.
Welcome to Heavy Networking, the flagship podcast from the Packet Pushers. If you're thinking about global Anycast, but the TCP connections that might be affected are freaking you out, hey, you found your tribe. I'm Ethan Banks. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, and please do. With me is longtime co-host and Packet Pushers co-founder, Greg Ferro. Today's episode, the exit interview. This will be Greg's final appearance on Heavy Networking, and we're taking time to reflect on the past, present, and future. Greg, my goodness, the end of the road and beginning of a new one, I suppose.
Yeah, it's very weird. Heavy Networking was the podcast. Originally, it was just called The Packet Pushers because I seem to remember sitting down and talking with you and saying, what are we going to call it? And you came up with Packet Pushers. And I think in the end
it was the best of a collection of poor ideas. It was the best one. We decided, it'll work.
Yeah, back in the days when we were engineers, and I think at the end of the day, we just went, whatever, we'll go with it, and it's fine.
Yeah.
15 odd years later, we're still going. But this is my final episode of Heavy Networking, and I will be also leaving Packet Pushers at the end of June. And so this is my exit interview, if you like, where I get to, what I wanted to do was I wanted to take some time to share some personal thoughts. So obviously I express opinions on the podcast that we've done, all the shows over the years, and you probably understand a lot of my personal views through the lens of what I've said. But what we've never delved into is things like career advice or what's my personal perspective on things. And hopefully we can do a little bit of indulgence there and let me rant on about some personal perspectives on things. Is that all right, Ethan?
I mean, you've made your brand on ranting to some degree, Greg. Yeah. So it would be, I would expect nothing less for this final interview.
The thing was that when we set up the show, I didn't want it to be boring. Like, if you look at a lot of the podcasts that are out there, there's always a little bit of color, a little bit of, bit of loudness, a little bit of rant, a little bit of, rubbing the grain the wrong way is much more entertaining to listen to than people, like a BBC radio presenter telling you exactly what you wanted to hear all the time. And so I didn't want to be on a podcast saying that. And at that time, too, I was also having a lot of frustration at work, like, working with equipment that was very frustrating to work with. It was unstable, unreliable. The industry was in a lot of turmoil back around the 2012 period. And so some of that frustration came through as well as being a colorful character. So if you've ever wondered why I was a bit ranty, it was literally a character developed for the show. And you were always my straight man. You used to always sit there and say, "Oh, Greg's going to be great."
No, I mean, and right, we knew what the characters were, and exactly, we played it that way. It was intentional. It was ranty Greg, and Ethan was the straight guy trying to talk you down from the cliff. Come on, man, back away from the edge. It's not that bad. It's not you're taking it too far. And so on. Yeah. You're right. It was and is an entertaining format when you can do that stuff. Of course, it scared some of our listeners at times, but yeah.
Also scared some of our sponsors as well. And
that is not untrue. Yeah.
It's a bit different. Like, that's one of the interesting things to talk about in social media, perhaps, is we were influencers in the mid 2000s. So all the things that you see, TikTok stars and YouTube, not to that level, of course, but, we were, being invited to go and visit vendors at head offices.
Right. It was a different kind of format, what was happening then and the way you made noise. For us, it was primarily blogging. We were both writing and had big followings because of our writing. And that was influence back in the day. Right. You said it's different now. We couldn't twerk on TikTok because there was no TikTok. So
that's right. I'm not at all sure that I would have ever been able to master the medium of TikTok, but we were able to blog consistently and persistently, and then we started the podcast as a bit of a thing. So we were influencers, or have been influencers for a very long period of time in that, and content creators producing shows week after week after week for over 15 years, and that is one of the reasons I'm wrapping up. Is I'm exhausted. There's been a bunch of people on YouTube, really well-known YouTubers, saying, why are they stopping? Why are they giving up? And it was the guy who did the science show, Tom's YouTube channel, and he gave it, and he was saying in his exit interview, he said, I produced a show every week for 10 years. And he said, I was never able to make enough money to have a crew. So if you go and look at some of the really top YouTube people, they have 30, you look at MKBHD or Mr. Beast, they have companies and they have 20 or 30 people, so that the people who are in front of the camera are literally only showing up to do the camera, like to do the content almost. They might run the company, but even then they have an accountant and a personal assistant and there's a director and a photographer, that stuff. And they have people doing the shipping of stuff that they get, they ship it back and all that sort of stuff. We've never been able to break out and make that much money.
We've done okay. And we do have people that work full time with the company. We don't do our own editing. We used to do our own editing. We've had editors for a long time, including Ricky Cook, who's been on the show before because he's also a network engineer, has worked with us for, over a decade now, but never to the scale of what you're describing, where there's a full production house that's backing that YouTube channel or whoever that influencer creator is.
That's right. And if you could get to that sort of scale, then you can run it indefinitely. And if you can get enough money in to cover the costs of all those overheads, then you can run for a lot longer. But we haven't been able to. We have to do a lot of the heavy lifting. So when we travel, we're still producing content. The traveling is extra. So when we used to go to conferences and events, that wasn't instead of content. That was in addition to the extra. Yeah. And so that became very difficult. And the emotional toll, I'm not a natural extrovert. I don't think either of us are natural extroverts. We're not out there. In fact, podcasting as a medium is best for introverts because we only have to talk to a few people on a regular basis. We don't really have to face it dramatically cuts down on the number of people you have to handle, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So to some extent, I found the traveling really tiring, and I just wasn't able to.
There's more to this, though. You said you're exhausted, but there's a little more to your health situation than that.
So the biggest problem I've had is I actually have what we now call chronic fatigue syndrome, or myoencephalitis, or chronic fatigue syndrome. I've had it since I was 19, and I've been able to work my way through it for a very long time. So for the last 35 years, I've been doing okay. I've been able to manage it. It hasn't really crippled me. But sometime during the COVID years, I think actually going into COVID, I was really starting to come unstuck, and the symptoms have really become much worse.
I think you dealt with a bout of COVID too, did you not?
I had COVID, but it wasn't horrible. Like it was, 3 or 4 days I wasn't particularly bad, but what I was during COVID, I was actually sleeping 14 to 16 hours a day. So I would go to bed at night at 10, and you would know this. I would be, finishing up work and going to bed at 10, and then wake up at 7 in the morning, having slept all night, and then up, work for 2 or 3 hours, and then go to have a nap for an hour or two, wake up, work for 2 more hours, have a nap again for 1 or 2 hours, and then work through until 8 or 9 at night, and then repeat the cycle. And that would happen 7 days a week. And that is like full on, a fully debilitated state. And that went on for quite a long period of time. And coming with that was mental fog. That what people just say is they find it very difficult to think. And that was bad for a while. It was consistently bad. And then it got better. After a while, I was able to get on top. So chronic fatigue, for what it's worth, is generally believed by medical people today to be a virus. It sits inside your body. It never goes away. And for whatever reason, I have it. And every now and then it surges, causes me very mild symptoms, but leaves you with what they call post-viral syndrome, which is this just exhaustion. Your body's just fought off a virus. Just like when the best way I can describe it is most people get a cold, you get really sick with the cold for 3 or 4 days, and then you're just really tired for a week or so afterwards. Imagine doing that, but every day for months at a time. That's pretty much the way I was. But what really came to me was I realized that the mental stuff, I was actually fading out very badly, and I was becoming inconsistent. So, and that's when you and I started talking about what are we going to do, because I can't keep going. Because some days I'm on shows and I'm absolutely on top of them, and then other days I was coming in and I was really not participating or delivering something to it. And so in the end, it just became like, how do we fix this? And so you and I have come up with a plan. You're going to be running the company from now on. So Ethan is going to be continuing on, and I will exit stage left.
We ran the company together since the beginning. And I'll continue on after you officially retire June 30th.
Exit stage left. Is it retirement? I don't know. Hopefully. It depends on how much money I've got, Ethan. I don't really know yet. But the hope is, yes, retirement. But I'm definitely going to be taking, from here, I'm going to take 6 months. I think this, the thing about social media is it does things to you you're just so hyper connected all the time, consuming information, reading and being involved in like Slack groups and Discord groups and Reddit, catching information to stay informed. And then, you've got Twitter and LinkedIn as well. And then, briefings and press releases and all that sort of stuff. And the question there is that, I never wanted to win in life. I just wanted to survive. And so the key realization I came up for a while is I just want to survive this, and I just want to slow down. So my next 6 months is going to be nothing. I'm going to delete all the apps, and force myself not to log in or check LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever. And I highly suspect that I won't be back, and this will be the last ride. And with any luck, I will be able to go off and put my health back together, and I won't need to work again.
It's interesting what you said about you didn't want to, quote unquote, win at life as such. You wanted to survive, as in it wasn't your goal to be multimillionaire Greg with 2 yachts and a jet and, on a private island. You just wanted to do good, do okay.
Yeah. My idea of success was to be about 50% better off than most people. My philosophy has always been, I don't want to be poor, but I actually don't want to be rich. When I was growing up, I had a few rich people that I bumped into and got around. And I looked at their lives and they were really struggling with lots of things. They had so much money they didn't value a lot of things. But probably the hardest part was they were always suspicious of people around them, thinking that they were trying to get money from them or get something for free or, take advantage of them or, be their friend for whatever. And I just never really, and I watched that and I just said, no, for me, money is not the end. I mean, I think I've said this a few times, I don't live to work, I work to live. And although I worked too much and I worked too hard, that was always because I was never able to quite get ahead of the curve to where I wanted to be. So I wanted to have enough money to be ahead of the curve, but not so far ahead of the curve that my whole life was defined by money, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, people say to me, what makes it success? Success is being about 50% richer than most people, because by then you can buy everything that most people want and have a bit left over. So if you're spending less than you're earning, you're happy, you're rich, you're not in financial trouble. So, my advice to young people, or people who are working is to say, you've got 2 choices. You can either try and get a pay rise or spend less than you earn and then save the difference. Which one of those is easier? And the answer is, of course, spend less than you earn and get the pay rise. You want both. There's one that you can have control over today, and the other one is not necessarily. And, hopefully I've got a section here on career advice, which, I've said many times that we would never talk about career advice on our show because we really aren't that sort of people. But I'll give you some personal opinions on that. But I've always sort of believed like one of these people who says like the pessimist complains about the wind, the optimist believes the wind will change. But the realist adjusts the sails, follows the weather reports and plans for the best and worst cases. So I don't see myself as a pessimist or an optimist. I'm a realist. And this is the situation I'm in. I adjust the sails, read the weather report, and then work out where I can be and have a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C. I think a lot of people have heard me say that. So my life has always been run on the idea that packet pushers was working. We kept changing packet pushers around. We've always had a plan A, plan B, plan C for things. And for me, this is the worst case. My health is fading. I'm not able to contribute to packet pushers like I was. And I think even worse, by staying around, I'm actually making things worse rather than, delivering not great content makes me unhappy, but I think ultimately it'll damage the business and drive the audience away. So
now you got a bunch of quotes here, Greg, that I think share some of your perspective on how things have gone for you over the last decade and a half of doing packet pushers.
Well, I'm going to work some of these quotes into as we go, but when we first came to the realization, and I first said to you that I'm going to have to stop this. And we were pretty sad. It was a bit of an emotional moment between the two of us, I must say. And this saying came up is and this is a Winnie the Pooh saying of all things. And Winnie the Pooh says, "How lucky I am to have something that makes saying goodbye so hard," which I thought is right? You forget in the moment, the distress of the moment that you're in. I'm giving up a company that you and I have built together for 15 years. We put everything into it to make it happen, along with all of our team members and all of the audience that has supported us. How many people have been lucky enough to have something like this to make it hard to walk away? Like if you had a certain type of job and you probably just can't wait to retire and walk away from all of those, people that you don't really like in a situation you don't want to be in, doing something that you didn't really love. So, I mean, I've loved being at Packet Pushers. I mean, it's possibly the greatest job you could possibly own for myself. And that's what makes saying goodbye so hard. And it is a little bit of a thing to say how lucky I am to have something that makes saying goodbye so hard. So it's a good situation to come from, to be leaving something so awesome and has hopefully helped a whole bunch of people. And that's why we started it. I mean, and this is a bit cheeky as well. The same saying that I had comes from Cookie Monster. He goes, "Me no cry 'cause cookie is finished. Me smile 'cause cookie happened." So, I mean, I am happy. I am sad to be leaving the company, but I am also happy to be retiring. I'm not going to talk about my personal situation. I am actually made some radical changes in my life in the last 2 years, and I don't really feel that people need to know about my personal situation, but it does involve a very radical lifestyle change where I live a completely different lifestyle. I was hoping that that would actually heal me enough or get me sorted out enough to be able to continue on for a while longer and keep Packet Pushers, going along, but it hasn't worked around.
Did you join a nudist colony?
I don't think I'd be doing anybody any favors. If you've ever seen a German nudist colony, you'll know why I'm not in a nudist colony. Having seen such things in certain parts of Europe. Yeah, so I think one of the questions that I've been asked a lot of the time over the last 15 years is what sort of career advice would I give to people? So here it is. The first thing about careers is you don't have to be smart, right? Being smart helps, but it can also be a negative. If you're too smart, it's a problem. You can actually be in a situation where you're too smart for your own good and then things go wrong. I think the best career I can give you is to be the most persistent and to be too stupid to give up. Smart people would go and do something easier like programming instead of networking, right? Smart people would go out and find a job that puts them where they want to be. If you're in a situation, persistence is usually greater than being smart because persistence brings luck. Being too stupid to give up means you just keep working at something until you master it. So you don't have to be smart to be successful in a career. You just have to be persistent and too stupid to give up, which summarizes the whole of Packet Pushers. Any rational human being would not have started a podcast, would not have published show week after week after week for 5 years before they worked out how to make money out of it. And that's really the success of Packet Pushers, was just sheer stupidity.
Too stupid to quit.
Too stupid.
Yeah.
Too stupid to quit. Too stupid to go and get a real job or, chase after some other dream. So if you ever ask me why Packet Pushers is successful, it's because we were stupid. The second piece of advice I would give people is always be ready to move to the next position. Always be looking for the next job. It's generally better to move than to settle in, generally. Now, there are exceptions to this. Of course, there are companies. But what I find these days is that management, middle management in particular, which is where most of us work, is lazy or busy. And they are busy looking for new hires, looking for new projects, or getting their own promotion. And the last one more than yours, right? The manager is also looking to watch out for their own position. So the days where they could give you a pay rise is no longer a positive for them, it's a negative. It comes out of their budget. And so what you actually find in this era is that management won't give you a pay rise because the situation is they're incentivized to not give pay rises. So it comes out of their budget. They're only given so much money for the year. And the way that the CEO prevents pay rises happening is they say, you've got 5% in your hiring budget and you can only give this much to your people, right? And the only time that breaks is when you quit. And then they say, oh, well, we can give you a pay rise. And that's because your manager goes to the CEO and says, this person's leaving, but they've got a job offer for 50% more. And he says, all right, I approve your budget overrun, right? And that's the way of it, right? I don't like it. It's not fair, but that's how it works, right? So be aware that hiring a replacement is a different process. It's a different focus. The pay rise comes out of bucket A. The I'm quitting and leaving, and then all of a sudden the counter hire comes out of a different bucket. So as a general rule, I don't believe in taking counteroffers. I don't recommend people consider counteroffers because usually by then you've made your decision to get out the door. But understand, but don't be angry. I've seen people online getting very angry about a counteroffer and saying, why didn't you give me that in the first place? And the answer is, that's not how the system works. Yes,
no, it's business. Yeah, it's just business.
Yeah. And the way that, big companies work is the the company says you've got a budget for this many headcount, you can have 5% for that to give to people. How you give it to people is your decision, blah, blah, blah. So I think the other thing I've said a lot I've actually said this a few times, but I think it's worth saying again, your working career is a marathon, not a sprint. You can improve your running performance with training and technique. You can move faster for a short time, but eventually you run out of energy. You can't sprint a marathon. Does that make sense? You can improve your marathon time. You're going to be in a career
as
for
a
40
runner,
years.
You're exactly right. That is exactly right. The way you pace a marathon or an endurance event is very different from running a 5K or running a 100-yard dash.
That's right. So if you're in a situation where, and this is very relevant right now, we're seeing companies cut 20% of the headcount, but keep 100% of the work, and then say we have to do 120% of what we did last year, but with 20% of the headcount, 20% less headcount. That's very close to my mind. Now, my political position is, I can say this now, is centrist. I live in the middle. I'm not right wing or left wing. I'm somewhere in the middle. I believe that the best of the world is a mix of right wing ideologies and a mix of left wing ideologies, if you want to take it at that. And I'm very much in that sort of mode. And what companies are doing at the moment is seeing just how much they can squeeze out of their workforce, especially tech companies. Tech companies are very happy to cut 20% of the headcount and then hire the 20% back again and see if that experiment works. Like it's an A/B test to them, just data points and seeing if productivity. And so if you're in a team and they suddenly cut 20% of your headcount and then say, we expect you to deliver the same amount of work. If that stress is killing you, if you're sprinting or accelerating your performance, there's only so long you can do that before you run out of energy and something goes wrong. So my motto there is, I'll take care of me for you if you take care of you for me. So you have to, I need to take care of myself. You need a day off to go and look after your family or to have a break. Take that day. Don't question that. And the people who never lose energy, the people who've always got, seem to be running a marathon, they'll run out eventually. They'll hit a brick wall. They'll have a car crash, at work. They'll burn out or suddenly be sick from too much stress or something. So that makes sense. I think too many people think in technology, because you can go as fast as you want. I think in technology is you can sprint all the time. No one's holding you back.
That advice that you just gave about, sprinting can only work so long comes from personal experience you and I both have of pushing really hard for a long amount of time and finally finding it catches up with you and you just cannot sustain that momentum. Your mental focus, your body's ability to keep up with the intensity of all those hours of working and deep focus is not sustainable forever. You can do it for some amount of time. For some people, it's weeks, some people it's months, or maybe even years, but it isn't forever.
Yeah. And you've got to be ready for that. You've got to know that you're sprinting and that eventually you can't sprint a marathon. At some point, you have to slow down. And the challenge here is that if you're working for a company and you set the baseline of how much work you can achieve, and you're sprinting, and then what happens is if you drop from that level, then all of a sudden you're underperforming, right? One of the evil secrets of owning a job is to never overachieve, because as soon as you overachieve, that becomes the baseline. And if you have to slide back down to a much more normal output, you'll actually be penalized. And you can't, and this is one of the idiot things about middle management and the way that the system works, is that, if you did 6 months of overachievement and then all of a sudden you start slowing down because you're running out of it, mental capacity and your emotional energy is spent, then you're actually going to get dinged for negative performance, which is crazy, right? In theory, you can get smarter and do work more efficiently and grow as well. But if you're not able to get an efficiency or some sort of advantage, mastering a new technology, if you're just doing it by sheer dint of working more hours, then eventually you're going to have to stop and take stock, and there's going to be a price to be paid.
You gave us everything last year. Now that you've got nothing left, your performance sucks. That's not good. Come on, what can we do about this? Yeah.
You should leave because you're no good to us if you're not going to work at that level. Then it's all your fault at that point, right? You made that situation. So work at a reasonable pace. Don't be an overachiever all the time, if ever at all. There's no reward for being an overachiever in many situations, especially not in the current financial environment. And one of the other things that I think people make a mistake about is choosing the type of work that fits their lifestyle. Now, I think we've seen a lot of hustle culture or aggression or lots of stuff happening in the media, especially in the social media, that you've got to go out and, and that's not new, by the way. When I was 20, we were doing the same thing, and over the years, I've had different people come back with, I can make all the money if I did this scam or if I just hustled or, did whatever. It's not new. Um, if you're hungry for success, then go and take those risks, go and do those things, and that's fine. Like one of the things in technology is people go and work for a startup, but there's an 80% chance that that startup will fail or you will not last the distance. Like we've seen people go into startups and 5 years later they're still there, but they're not getting paid a whole lot and their money's all tied up in RSUs and they've made no money out of it. And, they ran the sprint for 3-4 years and now they're just waiting to get out. But then again, and of course, the only story that you ever hear is like the NVIDIA people, right? If you're working at NVIDIA before the AI boom, and now we've got people at NVIDIA who are just ordinary everyday workers sitting on 10 million worth of RSUs, just waiting for the stock to earn out. Yeah. So
Yeah.
golden handcuffs, right? But that story is unique. That is not a lot of people. And the chances of you being in that type of dream, that would be the dream, working at NVIDIA as a mid-level functionary, and all of a sudden you just lucked in. That's lottery. That don't bet your career on winning the lottery. So
No, I rolled the dice on a company like that. It was ready to take off. We were a competitive local exchange carrier. We were going to take on Verizon and then the world. And yeah, we blew up. So it was going to be great if it had worked out. But as you said, 80% fail. That sounds about right. And this was one of the ones that failed. Too bad. Next thing I knew, I was looking for work.
exactly. And you didn't get out, and you put a whole lot of effort in for nothing.
Whole lot of effort, a lot of just grinding, piles of paper on my desk, grinding through work orders and supporting customers and being on the phone all the time and hustle. And yeah.
Weekends, nights, Friday nights. Yeah.
All of it. Yeah. All of it.
And would you go back and do that? Like, would you say, it's worth doing for a while? There's things to be learned from that and skills to be gained.
I was probably 30 when that happened, 35. And the time was right for me to do it then. Now, no. Nobody.
Sounds fair. So think about it. To these days, this is a much more salient argument because we're talking about remote work versus on-site work, right? And in my day, it was on call and also customer sites. So when I was, 30, 35, I was flying all over Australia to customer sites to go on premise to do jobs, as well as working for a reseller who I'd then go back into the office. And I once turned up back into the office of the company I worked for, and nobody knew who I was. Not my manager, not my teammates. They'd all changed while I was off doing the things that I was doing. And when I finally turned back up in the office, and people complain about remote work, like that was something. I literally turned up in the office and they went like, "Oh, you're that guy. I've heard about you." Been gone for over a year out on customer sites all over. And nobody remembered and never got a benefit about it. Yeah. So this leads into a discussion that a lot of people get like, why is it so hard? Why are not people helping me? And I'm going, the world isn't against you. Don't get the impression that the world hates you or that people hate you. The world's not for you, but it's not against you. You don't deserve anything from companies. You don't deserve anything from society. You don't deserve anything from people or institutions. They might offer it. They might even talk about it. Like the classic one is, of course, human resources, or as I like to call it, human remains inside of big companies. They talk a big game about protecting people, but their primary goal is to protect the company from you. And we've talked about that a lot over the years once that became a lot clearer. But they don't owe you anything. Don't go into the situation thinking somebody's going to help me. My manager has to help me. My coworkers have to help me. That's only partially true. I think the right way to look at it is to say they can assist you. They can be with you. But if you go in with the attitude that they owe you something, they're going to be hostile to you, and you've just put yourself in a very bad situation. Like, yeah, no one owes you anything, and you don't owe them anything is the reverse of this either. But you only learn that the hard way. This was something I learned the hard way further down along in my career is that, you're on your own. We keep saying you're on your own, but this is just one way to look at it. Another saying for that one is you're asking for the sun, the moon, the stars, but all the employers offer is a nightlight. So, that's talking to this idea that quiet quitting. So, before we talk about marathons and sprints, quiet quitting or just working to do the job, that's not a crime. One of the things that I've often said right since one of our very first shows is I might be somebody who wants to drive ahead and to get ever. But what I really like is having a team of people who just come in and do their job. I don't want to work in a team of overachievers or aggressive sort of things because things just don't get. In this career, You want a bunch of people who are just going to do the things like, is the data center there? Has it got space? Has it got power? None of those are jobs for overachievers, right? What's the allocation? Is there cables ready? That's not a job for an overachiever. That's just a job for people who will come in and do their 8 hours and go home.
Well, the point you're making that work shouldn't be life necessarily. You're not, especially depending on the position that you're in. You can work yourself to death for no particular benefit to yourself.
Yeah, but there are times in your work life when even if you're wanting to get ahead, wanting to do more, wanting to achieve more, where you're just tired, or you're sick, or your family, or you've just had a kid. It's really difficult when you've just had a brand new child at home, to be an overachiever when you've got that going on in your personal life, or you've got a death in the family, or, when you get older, your child is suddenly at school and needs you to go and,
Wait, Greg, you're saying personal life matters? I thought we were to give it all to the company.
That's right. Well, this is like the company will never love you back. You shouldn't love your work because the company won't love you back. Now, that was true. This is the thing that I don't think this is the end of loyalty. We used to, when I first started in a job, there was this idea that there was a quid pro quo, and there was kind of an unwritten ledger of things you did for the company, and then the company would help you when the low times came. But what happens in the current era is that has changed. By and large, for most companies, this idea of if I help you now, you'll help me next week or the week, I'll put in some extra hours now and it'll even out. The company just says, no, you deserve to, you owe us this. It's your privilege to work for us is increasingly a viewpoint that we see, and especially in tech, where it's a lot of really ill people, mentally ill people expecting everybody to do things for them. And if you cater to that, you're going to end up in trouble because that's just an infinite thing. So work isn't a thing that you should love. It isn't alive, and it won't ever be living. Make sure you're focused on the real things. Go out there and socialize with your family and your friends. Keep your personal life. That's the one thing I regret, is that in my career, I don't have a personal life. I lost it all catching planes to conferences, going to America every month for another conference. And it was just impossible to do that and have a family and have a personal life. And somewhere along the line, the personal life cost. So one of the interesting things that will happen to me now is I have to build a personal life because I won't have work. And that's a terrifying thing. Like, when was the last time you tried to build a friendship at 50, in your 50s? How do you find a friend and find somebody with common interests in your 50s? That's not a career question. I'm just stating.
Yeah, hard work.
Part of building packet pushers was the end of a personal life for me anyway. And I don't regret it, but I do regret it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Pros and cons.
Pros and cons. Don't know if I would, I never enjoyed the travel part, just so people know. The travel was a bit of a mixed bag. It was always good to meet people and to do some interesting things.
It's the end result of being able to see people in person was always the best part of it for me. But travel, and I still travel. Travel itself is not glamorous. If you're a person who thinks going to airports and flying in planes to go to events is a very glamorous thing, and that's something you aspire to, anyone that's traveled a lot will tell you it's really not. It's not that. There's not, especially if you're riding cattle class in a plane like Greg and I do. We don't travel even business class, and certainly not first class. Those are perks for very wealthy people, which we are not. So when you're riding cattle class and your knees are shoved up against the back of the seat in front of you, and, the person next to you had a questionable breakfast and they're pretty farty about it. It ain't great sitting in the back of a plane for 5 hours while you get to wherever you're going. And travel's it's just hard. You're changing time zones and all that. And it takes a toll on you. The plus side of it is the people, but it
was lovely being at conferences and meeting all the other people and meeting people working for vendors and finding out the backstories and what actually happens inside of these big companies. And, why is this product on the market, when it should have been killed off 5 years ago, and it turns out that there's a reason, I remember, I think there was two stories I have on that. One is, I was talking to the people about HPUCs. And I said, why have you still got HPUCs? And he says, and it got a bit tense. And then he said, look here. He said, we have contracts for 40 years of HPUCs with various large institutions, think military institutions. And they are 20 plus 20 contracts, right? So we guaranteed to be delivering this product for the next 40 years, and it's worth it for us to keep these products around. And then this was the same story with the Cisco Catalyst 6500, where
yes,
Cisco had I remember talking to somebody and I said, why is this product not end of life? He said, it is. But he said, but we have a $4 billion contract with the military, the US military, and they have, I believe it was the Navy, and they have a CAT 6500 shaped hull. And we committed to supply this product for the next 20 years. And so, and it's this contract, which is for this enormous amount of money. And so they just kept producing the product. And then somebody said, well, because we're producing it, we're going to put it on the price list because it doesn't matter if we make a bit more of it. And people just kept on buying it. And so the Catalyst 6500 just went on and on and on. And I suspect then that eventually they realized that this was never going to stop. And Cisco couldn't move customers away into the next generation because people refused. And Cisco was being stuck in this, retro sort of mode. And eventually they produced another version of that switch, which was identical to the CAT 6500 shaped hole inside of the
6800 line, as I remember right. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was the point, was to try and at least modernize it to something. So sometimes these companies have reasons why, strange things happen. And that was one of the things we learned by meeting people and talking to them behind the scenes about, and HPUX was the same, companies who had 20, and they had billions and billions of guaranteed revenue. Didn't have to do anything for it. Just had to, at the beginning of next year, there'd be a guaranteed contract that was absolutely guaranteed for the next 20 years to keep these products running. So yeah, interesting pieces of business, that sort of thing. One thing I wanted to talk about was failure. There is a culture of celebrating failure in technology, and I'm not a big fan of that. I think a few times I've pointed that out. And the line I often use there is that Humpty Dumpty died. So if you remember when Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall and all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put him back again, he's still dead, right?
So you're critiquing move fast and break things?
Yes, I am. I think that it's fair to say that a lot of failures don't have consequences, but that doesn't mean that failure doesn't matter. So one of the things that I found in my day-to-day life is that while it's fine for people like Scam Altman or, whatever to celebrate failing and stumbling onto the next, grift or scam-like business that they suddenly think they've found, down at our level, failure is absolutely, you pay for that. If you fail to do your job well, if you fail to deliver a project on time, you can't go back to them and say, oh, but failure is a success. We're moving fast and break things. Just because we failed doesn't mean we failed. That's not the, do you know what I mean? Like there's a disconnect between the hype in this technology industry that we work in and the real world is that, failure does matter. For a lot of the time, there is no consequences. Failure does just happen. But I often point out that people remember failure and they don't remember your successes. And so I have mixed feelings about the celebration of failure. It is worthwhile saying that, there's a lot of things in tech where we tried it, but it failed. But I often wonder if we've gone a little bit too far the other way. So be aware of that. Failure can haunt you for the rest of your life. I wanted to talk about big companies. One of the things that I've seen a lot lately is people worshiping CEOs. This, oh, I'm the CEO of such and such. And there's a lot of worship going on there. And I will happily admit that CEOs or senior executives, whenever I say CEO here, think about senior executives in companies, right? And sure, you don't get to be a CEO or a senior executive without talent, dedication, a lot of ruthlessness, by the way, and a lot of just being plain lucky, right place, right time, making a decision not to quit a company when you probably should, that sort of stuff. And that process of getting to be a senior executive narrows their capability into a fairly narrow set of activities. They don't get to make as many choices. Like people say oh, they're leading the company and taking them in a new direction. No, they're not. The CEO has to report to the board. Any direction that they set off with has already come out of a committee by a board or a team of senior executives, right?
But what you're critiquing here is CEOs as superheroes on some level, where they're lauded in the press and they're made to give great notoriety and fame online and social media. Is that what you're on about?
Yeah. And they're not. They're just one of the things that I learned about these senior executives was, again, meeting them at these conferences. And do you remember, I remember talking to one of them about it. And he goes like, oh, yes, no, my driver will do that. And he said, come over to my house and I'll get my personal chef to make us a meal. And the assistant standing there next to them saying, yes, you've got 10 minutes before we have to be at such and such. Mm-hmm. And we've got 5. And the personal assistants had a form that said it's 7 minutes of walking from here to there. We have to leave now if we're going to make it on time. It's like, if you've got people doing all that for you, if you're not cooking your food and driving your own car and working out how you need to, like if you mentally, like when we went to a conference, we'd have a list of things and we'd always be calculating how we're going to be at this location at this time. right? But if you had a personal assistant, somebody whose whole job was to make Ethan get there on time, how easy is your life? It just
surrounded by handlers telling you what to do and shepherding you around, and yeah.
That's right. Yeah. And if you came home at night and your personal chef has already created your dinner and it's a healthy, you can look thin and awesome, like, and healthy, because the personal chef has, made the meal according to the rules that your personal dietitian and doctor has created for you. That's literally how these people live, right? They never talk about it and say, like, my life, I'm able to do all of these great things because I've hired a half a dozen people to do all this work for me, just for me, right? Just for me, so I can cover more ground in a day. So just be careful when you worship these CEOs. Just realize that quite often they're not living on the same lifestyle. Like you will never understand this sort of thing.
No, real people make choices like we would make. Greg, we spent about, 2 weeks in San Francisco at an Airbnb because of conferences and work that we needed to do out there. And there was a macaroni and cheese specialty restaurant fairly nearby. Those were the choices real people make. Let's go to the mac and cheese place. It's been a long day.
Yeah, it was around the corner, and it was awesome, and it also gave me indigestion. Because when you've eaten mac and cheese with fried chicken 3 days in a row.
If we'd gotten it right, we would have had our handlers there and our personal chef making our meals for us. We wouldn't have had indigestion.
The dietitian would have produced a meal plan, and our personal chef would be producing us healthy, fresh salad, all that sort of stuff. So when CEOs say positive things about their company, that's their job, right? I've started calling it manifesting. Manifesting is these people who walk around saying, I want a man 5 foot tall, 6'5", blue eyes, works in finance, whatever. It's a really popular thing with the kids to say, if I just manifest my future, it will happen. And CEOs start doing that. They say things like, we've raised our prices to build a better product, or this is our best product ever, or we will work on providing the best technical support. Now, all of those things are not obviously untrue, except for the fact that they raise their prices to make a better profit, not necessarily to build a better profit. This is our best product ever. Well, of course, you've just produced a new product. What are you going to say? I made a worse product than before? You're not going to say that, right? So I just want to be careful about this and say, like, don't listen to what they say, listen to what they don't say. So we're going right now, corporate companies are going through a period of profit maximization. It's absolutely the trend. And it's trickled down from the biggest companies. Like the thing that we're seeing in America is that McDonald's is now shrinking. It didn't make its numbers in the last 2 quarters because it raised the prices on its products so high that people are now no longer going to McDonald's. Right?
I read that article too.
So you've maximized your profit and now you've found your new pricing point. Are they going to bring it back down again to increase volume, or do they keep the price high and capture the profits? I don't know. We'll see. But right now, what we're seeing is across all of the markets, raising prices until the customer hurts is the new normal. So we're seeing the price rises through COVID. We saw 30% price rises on enterprise IT. Through COVID, the addition of subscriptions also saw another price rise. Vendors are turning up the prices of subscriptions, but gradually. Be aware of it. What can I say? That's just executive speak will say subscriptions are good for customers. But don't worship those CEOs. Don't listen to what they say, and don't model yourself on what you can see, because the image that you see is very carefully presented. Like when you read analyst transcripts, I read a lot of analyst transcripts where, the CEO fronts up in every quarter to talk to the analysts. What I didn't realize for a while is that they literally spend 2 days in a boardroom going over what can be said with a lawyer, with a writer, the chief financial officer, the chief writing, and various members of the board to say, what is the topics that we're going to put forward in the analyst call? It's not like, we're just having a chat with the analyst. It's all scripted down to the very whatever. Yeah.
Let's pause the conversation for a message from sponsor Palo Alto Networks. 2023 is a year when companies are going to need to do more with less. As businesses grapple with economic uncertainty, it's more critical than ever to consolidate fragmented security and networking solutions to reduce operational complexity and costs. Palo Alto Networks has a new virtual event on its Prisma SASE, where AI-powered innovation takes center stage. You can watch this event on demand and see how ZTNA 2.0, Cloud Secure Web Gateways, and SD-WAN deliver exceptional security and ROI. Hear how the latest innovations in SASE can help your organization automate costly and complex IT operations with AI-powered digital experience management, connect and secure branch offices and the hybrid workforce with SD-WAN, ZTNA 2.0, and cloud secure web gateways, and unlock better ROI through consolidation of point solutions with Prisma SASE. Watch this event on demand at paloaltonetworks.com/engage/sassy-signature-moment. That's paloaltonetworks.com/engage/sassy-signature-moment. And now back to the podcast.
I tell you what, I want to talk about vendor technology marketing in 2024. There's been a lot of changes. Remember when we first started out, it's a very different way of saying finding customers who'd be interested in your product. Ultimately the point here is that marketing exists to get a lead to sales who will use that messaging to close a deal. But do you think it's different now from when we first, say 15 years ago?
There's a lot of chasing trends that seems to be more significant than it was. Everybody jumps on the bandwagon of terminology because it's very easy now with social media, much more than it was in, say, the early 2010s especially, to amplify your voice in that social media way. I don't know, intent-based networking is a thing. All of a sudden, everybody had an intent-based network, even though there were like really a couple of companies that kind of had something actually in that space. Cloud washing was a thing, and so on. All that messaging's. I think a lot of marketers are lost also in how to communicate with buyers. There's been a loss of trust between consumers of products and marketing messages, where the assumption is like, I'm being lied to on some level or another because lived experience is so different from what is being sold, that there's just a grave mistrust of what comes out of marketing departments, that it's harder to get people's ears because they don't care. They don't want to hear from you. It's very difficult to really to get people's attention. Plus the added challenge for a marketer of having so many things grappling for people's attention now. We were mentioning TikTok and making jokes about it earlier. Yeah, that's a thing. It's TikTok and it's Instagram and it's all the streaming media services and it's YouTube on demand and it's podcasts and it's so much more that are clamoring for everyone's attention, that it's that much harder to get the messages out there for people to listen to. And all that's just... it was all starting when we started the podcast, and it's just evolved radically, to the point now where the attention economy is, I think it's the most valuable thing that's on the marketplace right now for a marketer trying to get someone's attention is that.
It's so difficult too, because back in, say, 15 years ago, customers bought products, whereas now they're being forced to buy subscriptions to services.
Oh, that's a huge thing. Yeah.
Right. So, back in, say, the 2010s, we talk about the CAT 6500 and the CAT 6800. Well, you could go out and have a big marketing campaign around this new hardware and everybody would get on board. But if you're paying a subscription to the software, and let's take a lot of these cloud services like Itential or Akira, right? If they go and add this amazing new feature to the product, they just ship it the day that it's ready to go. So how do you market? Like, how do you generate interest around that new feature? How do you come up with I don't have an answer for this, by the way. I'm just flagging it up. Because before you could go out there and very closely target all the customers who have this product, we could go and talk to them and see if they want to switch to our product. Whereas today they've got these services, and my service has to be to hook people's attention in a very different way.
Or it's got to match a Gartner buzzword. There's a Gartner report that builds this category. Now Gartner's minted a term, and now everyone's in the position of, do we fit into that? We don't exactly fit into that. Can we squeeze into it? And so that they can check a box and get people's attention in that way. Oh, yeah, we do the thing too.
Yeah. AI at the moment, of course, is the big one. Everybody's got some AI in their product. And it's a bit like intent-based networking back in the day. Everybody can just put an LLM on the top of their thing and call it, on the top of their technology manuals and say they've got some AI.
Let's burn down the plans so we can talk to a fancy chatbot. I mean, AI is great and it's going to take us places. That's what I meant to say. That was it. Sorry.
I think it will eventually, but I don't think it'll be significant for quite some time. It's amazing. Like the idea that you can have a literal conversation, that is almost
amazing.
human.
I use OpenAI. I do. Yeah.
I do. Yeah. when I want something basic and not too complicated, I'll go with ChatGPT. But if you're going to start to do more sophisticated stuff, it gets a bit tricky after that. I'm not entirely sure that it's a worthwhile thing. So I've got issues. I have trust issues when I get into complex topics. And as people point out, you can go into AI and ask the question in a certain way, and it will just auto-complete following the logic of your prompt. Your prompt might be wrong, right? But I think increasingly AI is creeping into marketing, and particularly, but it's in multiple dimensions. We're seeing AI used for tracking people. So one of the things that salespeople used to do is come inside of organizations and make a map of the structure and then hunt people down inside the organization to influence them to be aligned with the company and then to buy their products, right? Well, now what they're saying is instead of using salespeople, who are expensive, by the way, very expensive costs, they're using AI to do that. And you can buy that. So the data that LinkedIn has, like, they can build a model of who's who inside your company just from LinkedIn with enough AI. But I think the most disturbing part is the AI for generating content. Like I put a tweet out the other day from Extreme, and it was just like, Extreme is an artificial intelligence company now. Extreme Networks is an artificial intelligence company. And this whole quote with all of this exciting blurb about it. And it's obviously that someone used an LLM to generate some sort of sloppy verbiage, and they just went with it. They didn't actually think to like put a human in the loop. I absolutely agree that AI is really exciting potential, but I don't think it's an immediate potential. But the problem for IT infrastructure is there's nothing else happening in our industry right now. There's no, we've got like some, are we building a better WAN? You remember when SD-WAN arrived on the scene? It was an absolute inflection point.
Oh, yeah.
All of a sudden, it wasn't underlay routers. It wasn't routers to the WAN point. It was suddenly this overlay, and there was all these things. That's not AI. AI doesn't really change any of that. It just adds to our existing stuff. So I'm not 100% sure. I do think the biggest problem that I'm seeing, though, is disinformation. One of the things I follow a little bit is electric vehicles or electric, like green energy and stuff, because I think it's interesting. And back there for a while, there was this myth that was put out which said it takes 70,000 kilometers in 10 years to pay back the carbon that is generated to make an electric car. I don't know if you ever heard all this. And it turns out that was Volvo-sponsored research right the way back when electric cars very first. And at that point, Volvo did not want to make electric cars. They were absolutely diametrically opposed. They thought that petrol cars was 20 years, 30 years, and that electric cars was so far off in the future. And that is an absolute lie. It is not. The carbon created in producing an electric car is less than a gasoline car before it even rolls off the production line. All of the metals and all of the production, all the electricity that goes into producing an electric vehicle is less than what's taken to produce a conventional fossil fuel powered vehicle, right? But Volvo got it out there. It spun into a myth. I think disinformation like that is certainly going to be like that. And we've seen so much of that go on, like, and some companies were really good at doing that. They were able to get out there with their product and say, we've created a market-leading AI infrastructure product, not AI, but, an infrastructure product, and create all this hype around it. And then everybody finds out it's just another one of the same. There's nothing fresh or new in here. So I do sort of think that marketing is going to have to change because, and that's important for podcasts, because part of what we are is an extension of that, or we revolve around that ecosystem. And it's one of the things that I've wrestled with a lot is how do you talk about products or vendors or the services in a meaningful way without falling into the messaging that they want us to tell?
That's always the challenge that we've had. We have before every behind the scenes audience, before every podcast that we produce, there's a planning call with the sponsor, so that we explain to them how to effectively communicate to our audience and get them away from their carefully crafted messaging points. It's like, look, guys, you're talking to engineers who need to understand how your product works and how it would fit into their network. They need hard data, hard information. Your messaging points that have these particular keywords, that is not the way to communicate messages effectively to this audience. So we have to sit with them. So what are you really trying to say? Well, we're really trying to say this. We crafted this words to say, okay, so you're really trying to say whatever it is. Let's figure out how to tell that story, because you do actually, in fact, have a good story, but not the way you think you're going to communicate it. And then that rolls in. And then I hope most of the time we're successful in those shows in more effectively communicating. Sometimes it's hard. Some people that record with us, they're so married to their script and their precious way that they crafted words. We can't get them to come out of marketing robot mode. We want them to be real. We want them to be authentic, if you will.
Well, you've got to remember that they have a lot at stake. Like if you work for a vendor and you're in a product that's just come out and you've developed, or a new feature has been added to a product, you've probably spent 2 or 3 years of your life working on that product and defining that product and working with the developers inside the company to bring it out.
And no doubt there's been customers they've been working with to figure out how market fit and how this thing needs to work. There's almost always some leading customers that are invested in the success of that product that they're working with too. That all goes into that messaging.
That's right. And if you've been, and that process of working your way through that, by the time you get to the end of that process, your brain is locked in on the things that you've done, right? You're not outside the box because you're so far inside the box that you can't see what's going on around it. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. If you've
been hyper-focused on a thing for that long at that level of intensity, you might only have the messages that you've written and you can't see the bigger picture.
Well,
so it is
just as support for that, Greg, occasionally we have people that come to us and maybe they just want to chat off the record because they're trying to get out of the box. They're like, we know we're in the box. We need to see outside of this. How is this thing that we made going to be useful to the vast majority of people? How should we position this? What are we not seeing here? We've had many of those conversations over the years.
I don't know if I've ever been able to help people, but we try.
We try.
It's an interesting conundrum in that sense. I just feel that marketing or how vendors reach out to talk to customers is going through a change. Before, it used to be done in out-of-band channels. I think the other thing that we're seeing is a lot of what used to happen on social media, what used to happen in blogs, is now trapped inside of walled gardens. And the one I think of a lot is Cisco DevNet, right? Hugely valuable tool, massively curated, organized, generally kept, negative stuff is kept out of it. But equally, stuff that's critical to Cisco is also excluded from it. But that can be helpful, right? As much as anything else. But because Cisco's kind of created the Facebook of its own, social community, or people who are interested in that thing, there's a lot of innovation and expansion and like going in different directions. It doesn't happen because you're inside of that ecosystem. Like DevNet is a marketing tool. It's not an educational tool or a training tool. That is absolutely, keep people engaged and don't let them go out on TikTok and make their own videos. Don't let them go out and blog independent.
To put a finer point on it, I mean, it is an educational and a training tool. But because those are marketing functions, that's one of Cisco's greatest success tools over the years has been their certification and training programs, because it builds an army of engineers that know and understand how to operate networks through the Cisco lens. So yeah, it is education and training, but because it's marketing.
Yes. The thing about, say, the open forums like Reddit, the challenge is that when you go to Reddit, it's all negative because all of the positive stuff has been put away safely inside of a vendor walled garden, right? And there's nowhere to vent your negative aspects and then of course, so these communities that were once thriving, places where to get advice on various networking topics, are now overwhelmingly full of negativity because there's nowhere else for people to go. And that bothers me a little bit.
No,
I don't know how to fix it.
We have our own version of that in-house. We've got our Slack community channel that, 3,000 some odd of you that listen to the show are a part of. packetpushers.net/community if you want to join that Slack group. But we have our complaints channel, and it's the steady traffic. People who are frustrated with a variety of things, and very often it's vendor related, and they got somewhere they can just go and air out whatever it is that's got them all wound up and maybe get some advice on how to handle the situation. So yeah, we see some of that spillover, Greg.
Yeah. It's just interesting to look at a lot of that vendor, the vendor communities, especially Cisco's one, as a place where it's got positives, but it's also got negatives. And I'm not sure how many people think about the whole 360 degree. They just participate in it without sort of thinking about what I might be missing out on. in those communities. It's absolutely great, and it's so helpful to so many people, and it reinforces people and all that sort of stuff. I'm just I'm sort of a little bit like, I wish we could go back and fix it and make it a little bit more open and flexible than what it is. But, people being who they are, you work for a big company and your livelihood comes from that big company. Well, you start to adopt certain attitudes that maybe aren't, ideal, but they're workable. So there you go. That's all I wanted to say. I really don't have much more to say. I mean, the real story here is that I've been winding down in Packet Pushers for the better part of, 6 months to a year now. Just focusing on network break.
Longer and from a lot of perspectives, yeah.
Packet Pushers will go on. Ethan is going to be running the business and keeping it going. We have a whole bunch of new shows that we didn't talk about. We probably should have. Got Packet Protector, which is a security podcast, and we've got Technically Leadership coming on. So there's more shows for you to listen to. But Network Break will continue on, and Heavy Strategy will also continue on. It'll have new hosts, and they'll probably take the show in their own direction, because shows are always a reflection of the hosts who are running them to some extent, I think. So
yeah, to some extent, yeah. So it's Drew will still be on Network Break, of course, bringing you the virtual donuts, and we'll be adding Jonatil Johnson will be working with Drew on that show as the main antagonist to analyze the news of the week. And so on, and might it sound to have a different tone? Yeah, probably.
Yeah,
Joan is a different person than Greg, so that seems natural.
Yeah, and hopefully you'll be around. And I just want to say thanks to everybody. If you're still listening, thanks to everybody for being with us for this journey. And I'm sorry that I won't be able to continue on for you, because I'm just not able to. I'm not unhappy. I could wish that we had gone a bit further, mate. Maybe a couple of more years would have been good. But, sometimes the world takes you in a path, that you don't want to go. And so really for me, it's that, I'm really grateful that we've had a good time and we've been as successful as we have. And that idea that, don't be sad that that the cookie's finished. Be sad that I had a cookie. It's probably, as the Cookie Monster says, that's really where I am. Yeah. Not too many people get to walk away and say, like, I built that. And I wish you all the best with bringing the company forward.
Thank you. Thank you for putting up with me for all these years. You were my longest running work colleague and friend. So that's really worked out very well.
I think we became friends. I don't know if we were friends in the first place, but we sort of.
You're a hard man to get to like, buddy. I'll tell you, you bring the full Greg and the full Aussie some days, and it's like, man, that's a lot of personality going on right there.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah. I was brought up different to a lot of people. I grew up in central Queensland, where life was rather plain, straightforward, rough, and then got citified. So there are some rough edges around my upbringing. I did some weird things in my life, backpacked through Europe for a couple of years, including the east coast of Africa and the Middle East, not just Europe and the UK, of course, and did a whole bunch of things that people find surprising, and they all add to the mix of who you are, don't they?
They do.
Where you go and what you do. So
now, Greg, you've said that you're falling off the map. Basically, you're going to shut down your social accounts and and all of that, but not immediately. As you're listening to this show, it's probably early June 2024. And Greg, we kind of all understand that there's some people that might want to reach out to you and say whatever. So if people want to do that, they want to just write to Greg and talk to you for a bit before you do sign off. How do they do that?
Probably the best place is on the Slack channel. Come on over to Packet Pushers Slack, which you can find a link to on the website. Sign up for that and then send me a DM. If you've got my email address, email me. I'm not a huge fan of communicating with people. If you've got me on social media, then you can Twitter me or hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm also tossing up. I don't want to be too egotistical about this, mate, because it's you don't know, right? But I'm thinking about holding a couple of open offices on Zoom. If that interests you, then let me know that you'd love to get together on a Zoom call, and we'll set something up. And I'm thinking there's a few people out there who have been friends with us along the way. I'd love to say goodbye, because I am literally going off the internet for at least 6 months, possibly indefinitely. I don't see myself coming back. I've had enough. social media. If you, I don't know. I think there's enough's enough. But I may be holding some open offices, where on a Friday, I'll have the Zoom on so that if anybody wants to drop in for a chat and say hi,
Not something we're going to live stream, but just a Zoom chat that's out there, you're saying.
Just as a Zoom chat that would be open to anybody. Watch out for blog posts on Packet Pushers, or check out on LinkedIn if there's enough interest. And if you're interested in that, let me know. I'm not going to go and organize it until I don't want to be that person who pretends they're like a big deal and, you set it all up and then nobody comes. That would be a bit, that's a bit creepy. So tell me that you're interested and we'll have a couple open up. But if you've been a friend of ours over the years and you want to have a chat and say goodbye, I'd love to talk to you. So many people that have all moved on in different directions and we've all lost track. Just email me or, catch me on social media and we'll set up a call and have a chat. I'd love to have you. And of course, remember that Packet Pushers is going to continue on. It's not going away. It's the same people in the same place doing the same things. And if you've wondered if Greg has been fading out for the last couple of years, that's exactly what's been happening.
Now, that Slack group that Greg mentioned, again, that's the Packet Pushers community Slack, which you can find at packetpushers.net/community. The join link is there. It's open to everybody. It's a marketing-free zone. There's a couple of very simple rules to follow, but again, thousands of people in there, and including the chance to DM Greg if you'd like to do that way. So thank you for listening to Heavy Networking today. This is a bittersweet episode for me. I've been I'm putting off being emotional until I shut the mic off. Not because it's there. I'm just keep pushing it back down. And with that, Greg and Ethan are going to sign off. Last but not least, remember that too much networking would never be enough.